Good afternoon to those who have just come through from our waiting room. Thank you for our patience while we got up and ready, and this afternoon's webinar is being set up for you. My name's Lola. I'm part of the research commissioning team here at ADR UK, and a part of the team who is leading this fellowship opportunity that we have developed our program around. Now, the Research Fellowship funding opportunity is an exciting part of our program for research to be able to use our flagship data sets for the purposes of benefiting the public good. Now, part of our series of preparing applicants is this delivery of our webinars. Now, the webinars are here to enable you as potential applicants to be able to apply for research funding to develop research agendas that benefit the public good using ADR UK flagship data. Now, the data is underpinned by our ADR UK flagship framework, and our program has been developed to support new users of our flagship data. So you'll recognise elements of our program are different to other funders. We want feedback from those who are using our flagship data, as well as developing research agendas, research proposals, and fulfilling them to benefit society. Our program is open to all accredited researchers, and we want our new applicants to kind of fold into our community and bodies of knowledge and build on previous and successful ADR UK Research Fellowships and their programs of work. In essence, these webinars have been designed, as has our funding opportunity, to inspire the use of our ADR UK flagship data and drive research that benefits society. So the purpose of these webinars is an opportunity, as I said, for you as applicants to understand the breadth and depth of our funding opportunity, but also the flagship data sets in use. Throughout the course of our webinars, which you can either find online if they've been recorded already, or any upcoming webinars that you are interested in, and we explain the scope of our funding opportunity in these webinars, and we showcase the breadth and depth of research possibilities through the individual flagship data sets webinars, as well as how to write a good funding application and how to develop research agendas based on different societal problems. We want to help researchers develop feasible and robust research agendas based on the composition of each flagship data sets. And like today, we want to enable engagement with those that sit behind each flagship data set, those that are most informed with how they've been developed, their compositions and their potential use, and give you opportunities to ask any questions that you have around each flagship data. Now, today, we are very lucky to have Philippa here from the Department of Education, who will explain the breadth and depth of our flagship data set, Leo. So I'm going to pause there and welcome Philippa on to, we've still got people coming in. I'll pause for a second just to see if there's anyone else coming in, because this is the most important part of the webinar. But Philippa, if you wanted to share your screens and get ready, and I will pass over control to yourself.
Perfect, thank you. Great, hello everyone. Can you see my slide okay?
No slides, but we can see you. We did see you.
Oh. There we go. Can you see that now?
We can see your slides. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
Perfect. Yeah, it's on the webinar setting, so it's slightly different to usual Teams meeting. So hello everyone, I'm Philippa Norgrove. I am a project manager on the Leo program at DFE, and great to have you all with us today. So today we're going to be covering Leo, which is the Longitudinal Education Outcomes dataset. And this is as Lola said, a ADR UK flagship data set. So we're hoping that there'll be lots of interest in applying for a fellowship to use Leo this year. So we're going to go through who we are, a bit of history about the LEO program, and most importantly, what LEO actually is. So I'll also talk you through the kinds of questions that LEO can be used to answer, including projects that have already used LEO, and we'll also signpost to some really useful support features that we provide that we hope assist our LEO users, particularly if you've not used the dataset before. Okay, so what is LEO? So before we go into the dataset, just a brief introduction about who we are. So myself and my team, the LEO program, and you can see here is our program vision. So this is what underpins all of the work that we do to develop the dataset. So the DFE is responsible for children's services and education, including higher and further education policy, apprenticeships, and wider skills in England. We work to provide children's services and education to ensure opportunities equal for all, no matter what their background or family circumstance. And you'll hear later how LEO data directly supports these aims. So the LEO program sits in the Cross-Government Data and Delivery Unit in the Data, Digital and Technology Directorate. And kind of the purpose of our team is to deliver projects that contribute to the DFE's wider cross-government data strategy, and we do this by working to improve the LEO products and services, including the external access service. So just a brief look at our timeline, and it kind of sets out the story of the LEO program. So you can see here, if you look back to 2013, this could be regarded as the birth of LEO. So then a few years was spent working on the development of LEO, first for internal use, and then 2018 was a big year. It was the first time that we allowed external access to the data. This was then followed up by the LEO pilot, where we seconded a number of organizations into the department in order to produce research using LEO. And then 2021 was a really big event for us in the LEO program, and hopefully the wider research community as well, because this is when LEO was first made available via the ONS's Secure Research Service. Since then, we've been working to develop and improve the experience of our external users. And I think there's I think I looked the other day, over 100 projects now have accessed LEO via the ONS SRS, which is amazing. So some of the things that we've been working on have included adding additional data to the LEO standard extract. So the standard extract is the version of LEO that's available in the ONS SRS. You can see here on the timeline, the second iteration in 2023, that was a really big refresh. And that was the iteration 2 of the data. And that is the current iteration of LEO that's available in the ONS SRS. But aside from the data, we've also produced a provision of different supporting features, such as the online research community and the introduction of synthetic data, which I'll explore later on in this presentation. So you can also see here our future plans. So where we are still continuing to iterate and develop this really valuable data set. So we're talking about LEO, but what is LEO? So the Longitudinal Education Outcomes LEO is a data set which connects individuals' education data with their earnings, benefits, and tax data. So the LEO standard extract connects individuals' education data with their EBT, earnings, benefits, and tax data, and it produces a de-identified longitudinal person-level administrative data set. So the LEO standard extract is a relational database, and it comprises of a range of tables where access via the ONS SRS is restricted on a needs basis. So you can see here on the cans that we call them, the cans, this is a relational database, and it comprises of 5 distinct sets of data. So we've got the NPD data, the National Pupil Database, that is schools and early years data. We then have the Individualized Learner Record, which is college and apprenticeships data. There's UCAS data, there's HESA, which is Higher Education Statistics Agency data, so universities data, and then the LEO data, the data from HMRC, and DWP, which is the earnings, benefits, and tax data. So you can see here that the LEO dataset is comprised of data owned by separate organizations, and as such, has numerous data owners, and you can see at the bottom of this slide here our different partners who all collaborate in order to produce and develop Leo. So just a bit more detail about what Leo is. So you can see here the formation of Leo and the including the years at which certain elements start. So this information briefly explained here, but it goes into a lot more detail on a document known as the variable request form, which I'll explain in detail when we go through the application process. But as you can see here, Leo currently contains approximately 39 million individuals, and this will grow with every iteration of the data that we release. The coverage is currently up to approximately age 40, and again, this will increase when new iterations come out. So it's important to note that the DFE's Leo, which is the Leo that we're talking about here, covers England, but there's also Scottish, Welsh, and Northern Irish Leos. So each of these Leos owned by different devolved governments at different stages of development. So, for example, the Scottish Leo is now available in the ONS SRS, but others are not available yet. So more detail about what exactly the coverage is in terms of England and devolved governments. You can find that information on the variable request form and also an FAQ document, which has some really handy information on that I'll link to later. So just a bit more detail. I won't go into detail on here, but just for your information, this is how we build the Leo dataset. So you can see here the involvement of different government departments in order to create this dataset. And the matching and linking process currently happens twice a year and is a lengthy process that requires the collaboration of each department. Ooh, sorry, I'm having PowerPoint issues. There we go. I'm back. So again, you can see here the overall overview of the cohorts in Leo. So again, I won't go into too much detail on this, but this shows the cohorts that are in the current iteration of Leo. And these slides will be shared after the presentation, so you'll be able to have a closer look then. So while Leo is a highly valuable resource and has many strengths, it also has some limitations. So to start with the positive, I'll pick out a few strengths. So it's great for showing what is happening. It's particularly strong for social mobility focused analysis. And you can really see that in a few slides to talk about possible questions that can be answered using Leo, but also a list of publications that have been published that do use Leo data, and you can see that's a real pattern there. It has national coverage up to age 40 and is growing, and it is a massive breadth range of administrative data. So these are some strengths, but what about limitations? So while you can see what is happening, it can be really difficult to explain why something is happening. There's currently no hours worked information, though this is something that we are looking to include in later iterations. And an excellent point here, money isn't everything. How much can you tell from looking at someone's income? You know, it's definitely a limitation of the data. So now we've gone through Leo and what it is, what can it be used for? So just to give a bit of background, as I'm sure you're all aware, the government has 5 national missions, and one of which is to break down the barriers to opportunity. So linked here is the DFE's Areas of Research Interest for 2025 document, and the ARI document sets out the key topics and questions where we welcome further evidence, and it focuses on DFE's research interests, particularly relating to the opportunity mission. So these interests are a relatively high level, and they aim to provide focus and direction on topics where further evidence is likely to be of the most value to the department. So what we've done is we've had a look at these and pulled out the kinds of questions that Leo can be used to answer that also links to the department's areas of research interest. So things like, what are the drivers of UK students' decisions about pathways into and out of HE, or what are the benefits of HE and FE on a range of individual outcomes, including long-term employment. So these are just a few kind of ideas about the kinds of things that Leo can be used to answer. Again, here's some ideas about what Leo can be used for. So the reforms in further education lead to better labour market outcomes. Which education factors have a positive impact on labour market outcomes of school leavers with poor attainment? And then yet more ideas about what Leo can be used for. So yeah, as I said, we'll share these slides afterwards, so do have a look. So there's possible questions, but here are some titles just to get you thinking about what Leo can be used for. So these are some existing projects that have used Leo via the ONS SRS in order to answer these questions and explore these topics. So something that we're really keen to share is to be able to showcase the amazing research that is done using Leo. And we currently publish on our Leo research community a list of publications that use Leo. So this document we've actually embedded into this slideshow. Again, when we share these slides, you'll be able to have a look. But it's a really interesting document because it collates all the research that's been published using Leo with links and sources. So yeah, do suggest that you take a look at that. So we've talked about what Leo is, what it can be used for, but how do you apply to access Leo? So the Leo data is available. The only way you can get access to Leo is through the ONS's Secure Research Service, the SRS. So in order to access Leo, users must be fully accredited before accessing the data, so have UKSA Safe Researcher accreditation. And the data must be accessed in a secure environment, such as a SafePod or at the ONS offices. So to apply for access to the data, you must complete an application form via the ONS's PASS system. But an additional ask for Leo is that we ask users to complete what we call the variable request form. So this document is a form of metadata for the Leo standard extract, and it's crucial that for users to understand the data and choose the variables they need, because Leo, there are some default variables and tables in there, but on the whole, it is on a variable by variable request. So as such, applications need to justify why data tables are needed in order to complete research, and there's a space on the variable request form to add that justification. So there's lots of assistance out there about how to complete an application for Leo. There's lots of resources on our research community. There's an exemplar variable request form to show you kind of what the ideal variable request form looks like. Also, it's great to point out the level of justification needed when specifying why you need a variable or a table. And there's also guidance on the ONS website. There's later on in this slide, I've got a helpful list of links. So yeah, do check that out. So just to note that it's currently taking on average 10 weeks for an application for Leo to be processed. So that is 10 weeks from the date of application submission to the date that the data is available in the SRS in your team's project area. So timescales may vary depending on if further information is required to process an application, but currently it's on average taking about 10 weeks. So I've mentioned the Leo research community, and something that I personally really enjoy about working on the Leo team is that we work really closely with researchers to ensure that useful information and support is available to help researchers get the most out of Leo. Or maybe someone is looking to apply to access Leo, haven't accessed it before, and are just looking for some support. So this is why we created the online Leo research community. And it's a way of bringing together users or would-be users of Leo to seek support from one another and also access an array of really useful materials. So there's a document library on the research community. It contains the user guide, the FAQs document, the list of publications that I mentioned earlier, and also there's a forum where you can ask specific questions about Leo. And it's really great to see the conversations that happen there where other users support users with their questions, or members of the Leo program team will help to answer your queries. We also make announcements on here for any events that we're holding, and also we want to encourage people to post their publications on there. We keep our list, but if anyone is looking for comments or just wanting to advertise that they've had something published using Leo, then yes, we definitely encourage that on the research community. So we think this is a really great source for researchers to seek guidance on how to use this very large and very complex data set. And we're really proud of the community, and it's continuing to grow. So we have currently over 230 members of the community. So in order to join the community, we usually ask that members have UKSA accreditation before accessing the community. However, we've agreed that if you're applying for a fellowship and you haven't quite got your UKSA accreditation yet, we're going to waive this requirement, as we think there's lots of really useful information to support an application. So if that is the case, when you submit your request to join the community, please note that you attended this webinar, you're going to put an application in for a fellowship, and yeah, we'll let you in and you can have a look at the community. So we have created the research community, but that's not all that we've made in order to support our users. So something super exciting that is happening is the Leo low fidelity synthetic data. So as part of an ADR UK funded project, Dr. Claire Crawford, who's on the call, and other colleagues from UCL have been doing some amazing work with us developing Leo. And one of the great things that they've been working on is a synthetic version of Leo. So this is a low fidelity synthetic data set. And the idea is that it gives users a chance to play around with something that really looks like the data, but is not sensitive personal data. So it's to be used for training and teaching purposes. You can write code there, maybe while waiting for an application to be processed for Leo on the ONS SRS. And it's a data set that retains the overall structure of the table without preserving the relationships across the variables. So it's intended to reflect real data, but isn't using any real people's information. So this is something that's really exciting. I think it's the first time that DfE have released a synthetic version of their data set for external use. And this is really close to being released. We're going to release it on the UK Data Services TRE, and it should be available very soon. So if you are interested, I'd say please look out for the on the research community. We'll definitely be announcing it there, but also you can contact us at our mailbox for any further information about Leo synthetic data or anything else related to Leo. So as I mentioned, we've got a collection of useful links here. Definitely ones to have a look at if you're thinking about applying to access Leo, whether with a fellowship or not. There's really interesting and useful information here, such as the variable request form. I'd say if you're looking to put an application into Leo, that's probably the first place you should look. It's a huge Excel spreadsheet and it shows exactly what is in the Leo data and what you can request. Also, the supporting documentation on ONS's website. It's really useful. And I believe really soon there's going to be additional researcher guidance that's about to be added, specifically about applying to access Leo. So yeah, do take a look at the ONS's website. So I think ADR UK, I'm passing back to you for any questions.
Hello, brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Philippa. If I can come back on screen. If you do have any questions, please do pop them in the Q&A function, or email them through to us if you're having an issue. and we will endeavour. And there's quite a few that have come up. Steve, do you want to?
Yep. Hello, everyone. Thanks, Philippa. That was really interesting. I feel a little bit smarter than I did half an hour ago. So yes, we've got a few questions that have come in. I just wanted to, before I read any out, about the variable request form. I have a question on that. So, assuming the variables are approved and then placed in the project space on the SRS, does the researcher then have to take the time to do any linkage of these tables, and sort of how long might that typically take?
I say, Claire, shall I pass to you on this one? You might have more of an indication of how long these things take. Let me bring you on screen.
Hi, Claire.
Thanks. Hi there. Yeah. Hi everyone. So the data, as Philippa was mentioning, the data is supplied in different data tables. So those data tables do contain pseudonymized identifiers relating to individuals. So that people will, if they want to pull together information from different data tables, which they probably will need to link the data on the basis of the individual identifiers that are provided in the data. So it is slightly complicated because there's more than one identifier available at the moment, but we're hoping that that will be simplified over time. So, and we've got code available in the SRS code repository that can support people to do it. So I think in practical terms, it's hopefully a relatively straightforward process for people to go through in terms of the actual way in which you would link the data. The tables are large, so it will take a little bit of time in terms of SRS processing power, but not like it's not a very large amount of time.
Excellent. Thank you.
Very helpful.
Okay. So let's delve into some of these questions in no particular order. So I'm going to start with the first one here. Where can I find details on which fields can be drawn from the data set? I'm quite interested in talent pipelines into industry, for example, tech sector following Chadbolt, Livingston Hope, etc. But wondering if it's even possible to find things like JACS/HECOS codes or similar for course subject areas, and SIC codes or similar for industries.
Do you want me to take that one, Philippa?
Yeah, you take this one.
Yeah.
I think I know, but I trust you.
Yeah, so I think, as Philippa was saying, the best place to look for what you can find in the data is in this variable request form. It basically has like a massive list of everything that's in there. It is a bit of a daunting document for people who are just getting into it. There are thousands of variables in there across data tables. So specifically on the ones you've asked about, both of those are available. So for the university subject, you do get those JACS or HECOS codes. Obviously JACS in the past and HECOS now. So if you want to make those comparable over time, you will have to do a bit of work to kind of do the mapping between the two. And then we also have industry codes from the interdepartmental business register data. So yeah, both that should be possible based on what you've said. And then there would also be subject information available from like GCSEs and A-levels and qualifications that people are taking earlier in the system as well, if you're interested.
Excellent, thank you. Just having a quick scan through here. There's another one that I think is quite a good question. So would it be possible or feasible to include linkage of survey data into a project space and in a fellowships application? Just on that, on the fellowship side of things, we do allow supplementary data if it's feasible within the SRS. But perhaps, Claire, if I can throw that one at you as well.
I can take this one.
Oh, okay.
I won't give them all to you, Claire, don't worry. So at present time, we don't allow any individual level linking to the Leo dataset. So this is something that we hope to introduce sometime in the future, but currently no individual level data is allowed to be linked.
Okay. Excellent. Okay. And I think there's a couple on the sort of logistics side of things here. So
I've
if
answered a few of them.
oh,
Yeah.
have you? Well, we'll read them out as well if that's okay. So if an organisation already has an SRS connectivity, can that be used to access the data? Yes, but is it mandatory then to become an accredited safe researcher?
It is, yep. So you do have to have UK Safe Research accreditation to access LEO. Yep.
And it's also worth noting that each individual researcher will have to apply themselves and have to register their own kind of computer details to access the SRS. So it's not enough for an organisation to have the connectivity. You as an individual, as Philippa said, need to be registered and accredited, and also will need to put in place the technology that is required for you as an individual to access the data safely. You need to go beyond whatever your institution has in place generally and make sure that it's done for yourself in particular.
I think it's also worth pointing out there that this process does take some time to go through, and there are quite a few things that you'll need to do if you are awarded funding. So just bear in mind that if you are successful in a fellowship application, we would strongly advise that you get the process rolling as soon as possible, and perhaps even beforehand if you can. So yeah, just wanted to add that one in.
Just to mention on that note, because there's a question that's come in about accessing the data, and that's why within the fellowship structure that we've developed for this funding opportunity, the first 3 months, you should not envision accessing the data. That is your time to prep for your actual undertaking the research. And if you want to use LEO, that's a time you can use to get familiar with the synthetic data, to build your working group and your stakeholder group, to think about your project dissemination methods, to undertake any training that you need to do, because we appreciate that it does take time to go through all these different unnecessary steps in order to safely access the data and then get to grips with the kind of methods you want to use in the SRS, because it is a tricky environment to work in sometimes if you're not familiar with it, and it takes different approaches to get familiar with analytical programs, to get familiar with your variables. And this is why it's the brilliance of the synthetic data will help smooth that kind of transition to working in an open office to working inside the SRS, because you'll be able to get more familiar with the data. So the fact the synthetic data is available is brilliant, and I congratulate the team on pulling all of that together. Can I just jump in on that and the synthetic data and the training? Because I am aware there are lots of events that the LEO team, I think I'm looking at you, Claire, on this, kind of put together to help researchers. I was just wondering if you had anything that was coming up over the next year that you could potentially flag to people who are in this call or people who might watch the webinar, if they are interested in kind of getting deep and down with the data and the data potentials, like I know you do kind of unpack in some of those sessions.
So we offer a range of different kind of training courses. Our lighter touch but still relatively substantial online courses would give you either an introduction to the National Pupil Database, which is part of LEO, and then it talks not only about LEO but also some of the other data sets that it contributes to. So it might be of interest to people if they're not exactly sure which of the flagship data sets they're planning to work with. We'll be offering that one again, I think, in January, and then again probably next September. But if people on the call want to see slides to help them with their fellowship, I'm happy to share them on an individual basis. We also do an introduction to LEO course. I think we're running that again in March. And then we've also got some practical training courses again. I think we're running the next of those in January. But yeah, as I mentioned, if people do want to see some slightly more detailed materials before those dates, then if you want to reach out to me via email, you're welcome to.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I know from talking to our current fellows how amazing this kind of infrastructure and support mechanism is for just unpacking ideas and concepts and methods. And the same with the community hub. I cannot recommend it more if there are potential applicants either for this funding opportunity or just to use Leo in general. I do recommend approaching Philippa if you can't get access in any capacity, because I'm sure she'll help you. Because there are different forums within that where you can ask different types of questions, and the breadth and depth of kind of conversations goes from the micro level looking at particular methods to kind of the macro level talking about implementation and what might this mean and different approaches. So it is quite enriching. You're on mute, Steve.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Just another one on synthetic data, seeing as we've just been talking about that. Do you need to be an accredited researcher to actually access the synthetic data?
No, you don't. So, yes, very excited that synthetic data isn't available on the UK data service yet, but it's going to be really soon. I know I said that, but I just want to make sure that it's not available yet, but it will be really, really soon. So no, you don't need to be UKSA accredited for the synthetic data. So that's something we were really keen to release the synthetic data and intended it to be used from people who may not have had a project in ONS SRS before, might be a student, might be an early career researcher. So yeah, we waived the UKSA accreditation for the synthetic data, and there are some terms and conditions to abide to, but no, you don't need UKSA accreditation to access the synthetic version of Leo.
Excellent. So you can get stuck in straight away as soon as it's available.
As soon as it's available, yes.
Yes, which will be soon. Yes.
Really soon, yeah.
Okay, great. So there's been a few more questions that have come in, and they're around sort of access to data in terms of the timescales involved. So one of them is, would the length of time to access the data be a hindrance to successfully getting a fellowship in the context of the fellowship start date? Perhaps that's something maybe more for you, Lola, in that respect.
Yes, so the project start date is September next year. However, if there are for any reasons you foresee this being difficult, please do get in contact with us, because there are certain elements affecting life that we're all aware of that we work around. So that's when the project would need to start, and the closing date for the funding applications is next year, with the panel assessments coming around April time, and you will find out if you've been funded around May next year.
Excellent. Yeah, and again, just to emphasize, getting access to the data, getting accredited, and all these things, perhaps even getting your organizational connectivity sorted, these can take time, so do start that process as soon as you possibly can.
Just to mention there, Steve, that access to the SRS is free. ADR UK funds the infrastructure to enable researchers to access the data. So even if you aren't successful with a fellowship, that doesn't mean you can't apply forward to use your proposed research agenda separate to this. It just means you need to find other supporting mechanisms to fund yourself to be able to do the research. So if you're already within a permanent contract position, you have the ability to undertake research, this might also be something to consider down the line, because I am aware that the breadth and depth, particularly all the flagship data sets, but Leo here we're discussing, is huge in potential and at the moment very relevant to what's going on with the repositioning of the government missions and everything. And I have seen from the DFE's areas of research interest that have coming through, there's a strong alignment. Correct me if I'm wrong, Philippa and Claire, with everything that's kind of changing in the political landscape at this moment in time. So that there's much thirst for the kind of information potential use of Leo to answer some of these questions.
Definitely.
Absolutely. Okay. There's another one here that seems to be sort of focusing more around the fellowship opportunity. What I'm going to do on that is I'm going to post a link in the chat for you to the applicant opportunity webinar that we held, I think it was last week or the week before, where a lot of these questions will be answered. But of course, you can contact us via our ADR UK Fellowships inbox if you do have specific questions that relate to your circumstances. But part of one of the questions is, are there any ongoing projects or advertised projects working with Leo to jump in on? I think the question might be about joining an existing project. Is that a potential possibility?
I think it would completely depend on the organisation or the teams that are running the project. Claire, what do you think?
Yeah, so it's not like there is a list of projects which we're looking to kind of commission through the fellowship program. So yes, in general, I would say this is an opportunity for people to bring their own ideas and suggestions of what they want to do with the data. Of course, I think as part of these webinars or as part of the material shared, there are some suggestions from each of the dataset owners about questions that could be particularly policy relevant for the data set in question. So you might want to have a look at those suggestions. But yeah, generally it's not a, here's a project we want someone to work on, please apply for it. It's more, please tell us about the idea that you'd like to use the data for. And yeah, that will be kind of considered alongside all the other ones that are put forward as well.
Thank you.
I think it's quite important to point out there that obviously, Philippa, you went through and sort of said areas of interest for the department, and I think you can, as a potential applicant, you can probably take those to help shape some of your thinking, but curiosity-driven research is also important. So don't sort of get tunnel vision, if that's the right phrase, when you're thinking about developing your projects as well.
I do have a quick question with regard to kind of data access and data use, just because it was raised in a comparable data set webinar, and I think it's important to probably unpack it here as well, because the similarities in research questions for grade, for example, and how grade complements Leo, and within that webinar we unpacked if you can use grade alongside Leo, and the kind of the questions, or not the questions, the question, it will support the questioning, but it will take a lot longer time because you'd have to get to familiar with two different types of data sets and two different types of data formalities. I was just wondering if either of you'd had any thoughts on what additional flagship data sets within the ADR kind of catalogue could be complementary to Leo when we're thinking about unpacking some of the bigger questions, particularly around education and education growth.
So
I guess,
no, go on, you go, Claire.
I was going to say, I think the first thing to note is obviously you can't have the same data set in the same, you can't have more than one data set in a particular project area. So you can't ever bring two data sets together to kind of learn more about them in a kind of linked way. You could, I guess, in principle, apply for two different data sets to use to address a similar research question. I'd say that's relatively rare because often with administrative data sets, what might help you to unpick it might be survey data, or it might be other things like that. So I'm sure there are projects where you could do that, but I think it's probably a subset of the research questions you could potentially tackle with the data. Just on the Leo versus grade issue, I mean, I think the thing that grade has that Leo doesn't is the data from Ofqual. So that is the detailed information on the marks that people are getting for the kind of cohorts where the grade data is available, which is the kind of subset of those available in Leo. Where Leo kind of allows you to move beyond what's available in grade is what happens after you've applied to university. So if you're really interested in the process of applying and whether someone gets an offer, whether someone's received an offer, if you're really interested in knowing how kind of marks affect that, and I guess particularly if you're interested in what happened during the pandemic and how that affected people's choices, then grade is probably the data set for you. If you're interested in learning more about the consequences of going to university or of making different application choices, then it's probably Leo, because that allows you to go and see what happens after people have applied to university.
Thank you, Claire. I thought it was really important just to tease those two apart because they are quite common questions that we ask, and I'm sure in the back of their heads and people who are listening minds, it's good to have that clear distinction. So I appreciate that. And just to emphasize the value of survey data, if you do want to use an additional source for Leo, is a possibility. And if you have any questions over what's possible, please do get in contact with ONS, who will answer those questions or any kind of inquiries that you have.
I'd also suggest if you look at the sorry Claire, the FAQ document that is linked in the useful links, it covers what can be linked to Leo, so I'd say definitely take a look at that.
So go on, Lola.
No, I've just got one more. I know synthetic data is on the horizon and coming into kind of like the public domain in the future. Will there be any open access code as well, where people have kind of developed different methodologies so people can just get used to kind of playing around with the synthetic data and using that so they could do the two together, particularly if they're not very confident in quant methodology, just to get familiar with the data if there is something that they really want to investigate?
Yeah, so we have code which we've developed that is currently available through the SRS code repository. So that uses the kind of language through which Leo is shared in the SRS, which is SQL. So if you are thinking of using Leo, you do need to be aware that you will have to have at least some basic understanding of SQL in order to be able to kind of navigate your way around it. So it's worth bearing that in mind. We do have other code which we are in the process of sharing as well. So yes, I think in theory people could use some of the code on the synthetic data, I guess with a few caveats. So Philippa mentioned that low fidelity synthetic data in our case means we've kind of stuck to the same data format, the same variable names, the same data tables, and we've preserved some information about each individual variable in any given data table, but we haven't preserved any relationships across variables. So any outputs that people get from running code on the synthetic data are nonsense and should not be kind of taken as inferring anything about anything real about the Leo data. So yes, there will be resources that can support people to kind of access the synthetic data, but it is shared in a different format to the way it's shared in the SRS for practical purposes. And so there's some dissimilarities in the experiences, and we do have a kind of documentation which like sets this out for people. But yeah, I think the key thing is it will get you so far, the synthetic data, but it isn't a complete replication of the experience of what you would have inside the SRS.
I think that's important to stress, but I can't undersell the value of actually having the synthetic data and being able to kind of get used to working with the data and the way the data is structured. I want to read this documentation when it's available. I would be really interested. I see it as a brilliant aid for teaching as well going forward. I'm sure you will use it. I do have one more question, thinking about inside the SRS and people having access to the code repository that previous Leo users has used. are there methodology type reports in there that people can look at, or publish data insights, for example, that previous fellows have done or other researchers, so they can understand the language of how outputs from the SRS should be structured as well? Because I know the output clearance process can be quite complicated and daunting, and something fellows and all researchers need to plan and think about is how you're going to get your data out of the SRS to be able to use for dissemination.
I don't think there are kind of guides to producing outputs for the SRS. I mean, I think the SRS have their own guidance that they share with people about the disclosure rules and so on. I think they're fairly agnostic about the specific format of the outputs, because obviously some people might want to take out a presentation that they've prepared. Some people might want to take out a table of descriptive statistics. Some people might have written a whole report or paper which they're asking for permission to release. So I think I probably can't provide any better advice than what the SRS would tell you directly, but I think, yeah, do allow plenty of time to get outputs out. I don't know what the current kind of waiting time is, but you should allow at least 5, I think 5 working days is like a minimum, and often it can take more than that. And the clearer you can be about what you're requesting, it's making sure figures are explained. You need to put sample sizes underlying everything. You need to make sure that your figures are kind of adhering to the disclosure rules that the SRS sets out. So do leave yourself plenty of time when you're requesting an output to both put it together. It's going to be more complicated and time consuming than just creating a PowerPoint presentation on your laptop would be, because you have to provide so much additional background information. And yeah, so give yourself extra time to kind of put it together, but then make sure you leave a good window of time for them to review and clear it before you actually need to share it outside of the SRS.
Thank you, Claire. That's super helpful. We've kind of emphasised as much as we can about how long researchers need to plan for actually working with the data, but you also have to plan for how you're going to then use the data, including dissemination and engagement with the data owners and anyone else who's involved in your project outside of the SRS, because if they are a member of your project team, they will also need to be accredited and have access to the SRS, as well as being identified in your project application to use the LEO in the first place, which is another aspect of administrative data management for our flagships data sets that I think is underestimated sometimes. There is one more question that's popped up here. How different is the LEO dataset to work with when compared with access to the MPD dataset? And is there anything specific to bear in mind with regards to the variables and how they're laid out when it comes to users?
Largely the MPD and the version of the MPD parts of LEO are very similar. So some differences might be whether files are shared like as one long file with lots of years appended together, or whether they're supplied as separate files for each year of data. So that might be one difference that people might come across. That just means you'll have to do more merging or more appending, depending on how you want to use the data, or more kind of selecting of information. But one big difference, which I don't think we've covered today, but compared to the MPD, is that in LEO, you cannot identify any schools, colleges, universities, businesses in the way that you can in a standalone MPD data set. Obviously not businesses, but the schools and colleges and universities. And that's because of the legal gateway through which the data is shared. So if you are thinking of a project which really needs to be able to identify universities in order to be successful, or really needs to be able to identify schools in order to be successful, LEO is probably not the data set for you, because you can't see what those institutions are. You can see a pseudonymized identifier, so you can see who goes to the same place, but you can't see the specific entity. And that's because of the Digital Economy Act rules, which is what LEO is shared under, in contrast to the way in which the MPD is currently shared. So that's probably the most important thing to bear in mind in terms of the differences that people might see.
Thank you, Claire. I'm sure that's hugely helpful. I know I've heard those kind of discussions happen before at other events, and I think it's a really important point when they're thinking about feasibility and if your data set is the right data set, but also is your question actually delving in and using the kind of the advantages of specific data, because I think the two are complementary. Steve, I haven't noticed any more that have come through. Have you?
No, I think we have probably hit the end of the road with questions. So thank you all very much for that. And Lola, yep, if you want to just signpost.
Yes, first of all, thank you to Philippa and Claire, both for coming along today for an excellent presentation and insights into Leo and unpacking the wealth of support I think is really valuable here to emphasize behind the use of the data set and the work that has gone into both provisioning the data itself, but in enabling research community to grow and be a kind of a point of excellence when it comes to sharing information and sharing best practice and knowledge growth. I mentioned at the beginning there are a number of webinars that have been developed to support the launch of this funding opportunity. Some have already passed, but they are available on the ADR UK website to watch. And there's a few more that are still coming up and due to happen, which you can still sign up for. And there's a couple that I do want to raise because I'm aware that Leo will probably be referenced in the Community Catalyst research agendas, given the value of the data set in answering some of our Community Catalyst research agendas in general. And also how to write a good funding application, which again has been developed by members of our Community Catalyst who are also and have been and probably still will be on our funding panels. So that's a really good opportunity to understand what it takes to write a good application for an ADR UK Research Fellowship from those that have both kind of worked alongside it to support applicants previously, but also who assess them when they come into our panels. If you have any other questions regarding Leo as a data set, please do get in contact. The team is here to help. And as you can see, there's a breadth and depth and huge amount of knowledge. Yes, Claire. Sorry, I just saw your hand pop up.
No, do finish and I'll come in after you're done.
No, I was just saying that please do get in contact. We're here to help and here to understand. And as is the Leo community, by the sounds of it, there is opportunities to kind of start to ask some of those kind of higher level questions when you're thinking about developing research agendas to those that already use Leo as well. Go on, Claire.
And I was just going to cheekily leap in and say that we're running a Festival of Social Science event tomorrow, 1 o'clock on Leo. So it's showcasing some of the kind of value of Leo to answer policy questions. And so you'll get to see a couple of research presentations from people who've used the data for kind of interesting purposes. So if you happen to be free tomorrow lunchtime.
You've gone on mute again, Claire, sorry.
Sorry, yeah, I've put the link in the chat, so do sign
Thank
up if
you.
you're interested and happen to be available tomorrow and want to find out more about what Leo can be used for.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. We will see if we can get any outgoing comms on that event as well through our channels, because I know the value of actually listening to the researchers using the data and how powerful it is. We've got 2 minutes left, so if no one has any other comments or thoughts or questions, I would like to close this and thank everyone again for coming to listen and for the speakers for giving up their time today to inform everyone. And that calls it an afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Appreciate it.